if you know me, you know that fitness is something that I value a lot, and I really enjoy getting a good workout in. And about 8 months ago, I had a friend introduce me to a new kind of workout that I found out that I really enjoyed, and that's called spin class. Now, you might be wondering what spin class is. I can assure you it is not twirling batons. I have been asked that multiple times. Spin class is just a cycling class. And in your spin class, you're there with a group of people. You have an instructor or teacher in front, and they have you adjust one of two things generally: your speed, which is measured by RPM, and your resistance on your bike. And that's how you can simulate going uphill, downhill, sprinting, different kinds of workouts to reach different types of muscles and work on different parts of your own cardio. So I end up moving to Ames, and I find a gym that has free spin classes every week, one of which being Monday mornings. And I love a really good cardio workout to kick off my work week. So I started going to that class every week. The one downside of the class is that the equipment wasn't the best. The bikes weren't very adjustable. They didn't show a lot of good data, a lot of good information for you to use. It really just had your RPM, and then you had to kind of guess on your levels for the resistance as well. But we had this promise that we were going to get these newer, better bikes. And the day finally comes for us to get these bikes, and I go in there, and these bikes are absolutely awesome. They are super adjustable, and they also have so much data on the screens that I love to see. So I am very excited to get to ride these bikes. And as we start going in this class, I start to notice pretty quick that something seems a little off on my screen. So my resistance seems to be working really well. It changes when I change. But my RPM is either lagging or there's something up with it. It's just not tracking very well. So pretty early on in the class, I decide that I'm going to ignore what my RPM says. Luckily, I've been doing this once a week for about 6 months, so I have a pretty good idea on what it feels like. So I'm going to start pedaling just based off of what I think I should be doing right around here. We get to the end of the class. That's worked out fairly well for me. I'm a little disappointed. It's not showing me the calories and distance and stuff that I actually did. But I'm pedaling, and we get to the last ride of the class. And the last ride of the class is we're going to do a climb. So you crank up the resistance, you slow down, but as the teacher tells us, you try to stay above 60 RPM. So I crank up that resistance to get a great workout in. Last ride of the day, last song of the day. I'm cranking it up, and I'm trying to pedal right at about 60 RPM. And halfway through, I see the girl that's sitting diagonal from me. She's riding, and she is riding all out. Like, she is going full speed ahead, and she would like hesitate, turn down her resistance, and try to pedal even faster, which is the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. And I'm very curious, and I look over and I see her screen, and it's saying about 56 to 58 RPM. And after a little bit more time, I start to realize her RPM is changing based off of how I was riding. So yes, I wasn't even doing what I was supposed to do. I was going too slow because I was trying to base what I was doing. I was trying to gauge the speed, reach my goals based off of how I felt. And she was doing the complete opposite because she thought she was looking at a gauge that was getting her to the goal she had set to hit that RPM, but the gauge was incorrect for what she was doing. So it's kind of this funny scenario that right now, as we go into the new year, a lot of us have goals that we've set for ourselves. Maybe that is to go to a spin class, I don't know. But generally we have these goals that we want to reach and we want to hit. I think that's great. I don't think it has to be a New Year's thing. I think you absolutely should have goals written down for you. I think the biggest thing to reaching a goal is having a goal. That's a whole another thing I could go on for a long time. So we'll move on from that. And I won't tell you exactly what your goals should be as a person or even as a Christian, but I will say that as a Christian, one of your goals should be something that revolves around what we see in John 15. In John chapter 15, verse 5, we have Jesus teaching his disciples. And he says, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. So what is this goal that we should have? Well, as a Christian, this goal that we should have is that you remain in God and God remains in you. Now, as we just discussed, it's not enough to have a goal. You need to have a gauge by which you can monitor, are you making progress to your goal? Are you reaching that goal that you have set for yourself? Lucky for us, this verse gives us that gauge. So as we continue, it says, if you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the Bible or have not been around it as long, that might not make a lot of sense to them. But what we see, the fruit analogy is a motif that we see throughout the New Testament. And what it says is that you know a tree by its fruit. So a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree bears good fruit. So as a Christian, as we have this goal to remain in God and Him in us, we have to ask ourselves, how are we monitoring that? What is our gauge? And the gauge is that you will bear fruit. If we jump ahead in the Bible to Galatians 5, we see Paul writing a letter to the church in Galatia. And he says in verse 22, but the fruit of the Spirit. So what is the fruit that we want to have? It's right here in this verse, in verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. As you set these goals for yourselves, and again, I think it's very important to have life goals, to have spiritual, emotional, all these different types of goals. But as you set these goals for yourselves, let's ask ourselves, what is the goal that we have set? And does it involve us being close with God and Him remaining in us? Because I think it should, one of them should. And how are we gauging whether we're doing that? Because even though I rode that bike every single week for 6 months, I was not a good gauge on determining whether I was reaching the goal. And for the first person who thought they were looking at a gauge, that gauge was not based on reality. That gauge was not based on truth. And so they were also not reaching the goal that they had set and were trying to reach for themselves. So as a Christian, we need to seek out our gauge from truth, from absolute truth, not how we feel, not what we see in the world, but from what the Bible tells us. And so your gauge, are you producing fruit? Are you in God? Is God in you? Are you growing? Are you displaying love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control?